It is my privilege to present you today Anna Maria Daou. Anna Maria is from Lebanon. She used to be a Chevening scholar, working in studying in King's College London, and her academic work revolves very much around the topic of interfaith dialogue, field building, and reconciliation, especially in divided contexts and in divided societies. She's a practitioner with very strong academic background, co-authored multiple publications, books, and is currently holding the place of community engagement coordinator at Adian Foundation. I'm sure she will talk about this as well in her presentation. Anna Maria, I don't know how else to present you. I think you could do it better because with your not very old age, so many amazing qualities and amazing results of your work that I can see in front of me in your bio is almost impossible to remunerate. So please, you have now the floor, and I wish us a very interesting, fruitful day.
Thank you, Anna, and thank you everyone for joining us today. It's always a pleasure to meet people from all over the world and have a discussion and share my experience and learn from other people's experiences as well. I will share my screen now for the presentation. So just, is it visible for everyone? Yep, okay. So today's talk will be about religion, dialogue, and diversity. First, I will introduce myself. I was born and raised in Lebanon. I hold a master's in conflict resolution from King's College as a Chevening scholar. I was previously the community engagement coordinator at Adian Foundation, and currently I hold the position of head of research unit. I just started a few weeks ago. I'm passionate mainly about bringing people together, about changing the world, which is a really big dream, I think. And when I'm not busy doing that, I'm passionate about cooking and baking. People who know me and are in our discussion today know how I'm obsessed I am with this. So before we start our talk today, we will have a small interactive quiz on Mentimeter for you to see your knowledge or to quiz your knowledge about Lebanon. It will be short, and I think my colleagues will be sharing the Mentimeter. Yes, I see that it's shared. So if you could please all click on this link, you're supposed to get into the quiz, and I'll share my screen again for the presentation, and we can start answering the questions, and then we'll see at the end who has the most knowledge about Lebanon before we start with our presentation. So if you can just give me a second. Yes. Okay. Oh, I see that many people have joined already. Okay. Just need to check if you're... Can you see the questions? I think I'm having a...
I can't see the questions, but maybe other people can.
Can you see it on your devices?
Anna Maria, maybe it will be if you start your presentation and we share the code to Mentimeter, maybe that will also work.
Yeah. Because what I get is that quiz is not open. That's what I'm getting. As well.
Okay, I think you're supposed to... Okay, I think it's working.
Yeah, it works. Yes.
Okay, so the first question is, in what continent is Lebanon located? You have 3 choices: Africa, Asia, or Europe. And there's a timer at the bottom. Okay, so we have 15 people who answered Asia, 1 person who answered Europe, and 7 who answered Africa. The correct answer is Asia. I'm glad that most of our participants today know the answer to this question. The next question.
Sorry, I just got stressed and actually first time using this program, so it was like stressed and first answer like Europe and
Maya, don't worry, nobody saw that you got it wrong.
Yeah. So the second question is, how many official religious sects are recognized in Lebanon in the constitution? Is it 18, 27, or 6? Excited to see the answers here. So 11 answered 18, 6 answered 27, and 8 answered 6. The correct answer is 18 recognized official sects in Lebanon. Our next question is, at the end, we'll see who got the most correct answers. In Lebanon, it has been a custom to specify the confessions of the President of the Republic, the Prime Minister, and the Speaker of Parliament. So all of these are supposed to be from a certain religious background or confession. Is this true or false? "20 answered true, 5 answered false." The correct answer is true, and we will go into more details within our presentation. So it's a custom, it's not officially in the constitution or written anywhere. Question number 4, and it's before the last one. In Lebanon, the parliament is made up of 70% Muslim representatives and 30% Christian representatives to reflect the difference in population or in the religious background of the population. And this is true or false? Wow. Okay, so 14 answered true, 14 answered false. The answer is false because the representation is 50% Christians and 50% Muslims, regardless of the fact that Muslims in Lebanon or the number of Muslim population is greater than the number of the Christian population. The last question, question 5 of 5. The first Muslim-Christian convocation in Lebanon took place in, it was supposed to be 1948, 1966, or 1954. So the first official interreligious convocation in Lebanon, in what year did it take place? Okay. So the correct answer is 1954. I don't know why many people answer 1966. I think it's more because during this decade, a lot of similar convocations took place. So now we can see who's the first 3. Pavel, congratulations for knowing Lebanon that much. I'm surprised that Lebanese were not in the top 3. So congratulations. Pavel. This was a fun way to get to know Lebanon based on the conversation we will be having today. I will share my presentation again, and then we can move forward with our discussion. I will just start my timer so that I don't go over the allotted time for me. I can't seem to share this. Okay. So first, we will start by trying to define interreligious dialogue, which is quite impossible because there are so many definitions and so many explanations. However, I really like to go back to the definition present in the Vatican document Dialogue and Proclamation. And also my colleagues from Salto will share the link for this document in particular. Why? Because it focuses on the 3 aspects of interreligious dialogue or dialogue in general. The first is the process of reciprocal communication. So it's a communication that goes back and forth, and its main purpose is to share knowledge. The second basic component of dialogue is an attitude of respect and friendship. So we cannot go into the dialogue thinking that this is a debate or thinking that my opinion matters more than the opinion of the person in front of me. So this is an attitude of respect and friendship, and it also breaks the fear that we have from the different other or from the unknown. The third particular component of dialogue that I like to focus on is religious diversity in the terms of mutual understanding, enrichment, truth, and freedom. So what we're trying to understand is something mutual, to understand the religious beliefs or the religious rituals of other people, for us to enrich our knowledge more and to get closer to what we define as truth and freedom. There is also 3 points that we have to focus on. One, we have to understand that interfaith dialogue or dialogue in general is between people and is not a dialogue between religions. So people are the ones who are in dialogue, and this is not to say that religions are the one in dialogue. And as you know, if we are speaking that people are in dialogue, so people are different, they interpret beliefs differently, they interpret faith and religion differently. So we have to take this into consideration when speaking about IRD. The second point that we have to focus on is that we need to engage with differences during dialogue as much as we engage with similarities. A lot of people think that the best way to achieve the best results for dialogue is through focusing on what brings us together rather than what separates us from each other. However, if we do not talk about those differences, then how can we move forward in the dialogue process? The third point to take into consideration is that both religion and culture, as well as individuals, they are salient. So they change over time. They are not something that is fixed. So if I understand religion in a certain way today, this might change tomorrow or in a week's time or in a year's time. So those 3 points have to be taken into consideration when speaking about dialogue. A very brief development of interreligious dialogue in the world. So the official public rise of interreligious dialogue was during the first World Columbian Exposition in 1893, where it joined the Parliament of World Religion. So it formally joined for the first time representatives of Eastern and Western spiritual traditions. I forgot to say at the beginning that you will notice some theoretical background in my presentation, and then you will, in the second part, notice that we will go into something more practical. In addition to the public rise of IRD, we have globalization and the increase in interaction between people from different countries, from the West and the East, from the North and the South. So this increase in interaction increased the need for some kind of dialogue, whether cultural or religious. However, with the start of interreligious dialogue, and even until now, many people think of it more as a ploy. Why? Because they think that interreligious dialogue's main objective, or dialogue's main objective, is to if we want to say to let go of individual identities and go into a more melting pot, acculturation in a certain society. However, dialogue, on the contrary, it focuses on individual identities, and it goes from there, from a person's individual understanding of oneself into understanding the different other. There was also a shift in using the term interreligious and interfaith to have more inclusion of people who, for example, have certain faiths but do not follow a certain religion. And then we would talk more into details regarding people who are agnostics or atheists or do not identify with any faith or religion. It is also to understand that there are two levels of interreligious dialogue: the theological, which happens on the level of religious leaders, theological debates, religious understandings or interpretations, and dialogue that happens on the practical or communal level between people and communities. I don't know if a lot of you are aware of Galtong's definition of negative and positive peace. So Galtong writes about the difference between negative and positive peace. Negative peace as being the absence of war, and positive peace as restoration of relationships, equality, and the creation of a social system that serves the need of the whole population. So if we go further into positive peace, we see that it's not just the absence of war and conflict, it's also how the entire society's fabric is being restored. And this is why a lot of scholars and academics and social scientists have written a lot on religion as drivers for peace. However, a lot have also written on religion as drivers of conflict, especially if we look at the world around us. A lot of people say, how can religion be used as a tool for peace while it's being used as a tool to instigate wars and to maybe increase violent extremism around the world? And this is something we will see throughout the presentation. If I want to talk about interreligious dialogue in Lebanon in specific, there is something you should understand, and this is part of the question that I asked in the Mentimeter presentation. So the political system in Lebanon is the system of confessionalism, meaning that political representation is really directly related to religious authorities or religious representation as well. And this is kind of not mentioned, but specified throughout history through the 1926 Constitution, and then in 1943 National Pact between different religious communities and political communities in Lebanon, and then the Ta'if Agreement in Saudi Arabia at the end of the 15-year civil war in Lebanon. So all of those important milestones in Lebanon have increased or entrenched the system of confessionalism in Lebanon. There is also a huge dilemma regarding the respect for freedom of religion or belief in Lebanon, which is clearly stated in the constitution, versus the personal status law in Lebanon. Because as you know, as some of you might know, we do not have a civil law in Lebanon. So there's only a personal status law that governs everything related to marriage, divorce, custody, inheritance, etc. So if I'm, for example, Christian, I have to follow the Maronite personal status law. My friend is Sunni, he has to follow the Sunni personal status law. So there is no one or unified law that specifies the personal status of every person. So this is kind of, it makes it really hard or difficult for people who identify with religions that are not officially recognized by the constitution or outside of the 18 recognized official sects in the constitution. As we also saw in the Mentimeter, is that in 1954, we had the first official Christian-Muslim convocation in Lebanon, which was between people or religious people from different backgrounds, and it was a high-level dialogue. It was not something on the level of community. Here, I would like also to situate interreligious dialogue according to four major social science scholars, and I would really advise you to read the work of Khouri, Samak, Haugerode, I'm sorry if I'm pronouncing his name wrong, Haddad and Fishback. So the four models of dialogue, according to Khouri, is the dialogue of life, which is basically among lay people from different religious backgrounds to discuss everyday relations between communities rather than contentious religious issues. So it's on the level of what concerns the community on the social level, educational level, economic level. The unity dialogue is where lay people or normal people discuss shared issues and ways to resolve them. This could be on the local level, on the regional level, or on the national level. Shared rituals, it's when religious leaders and lay people celebrate ceremonies together. So they participate in, for example, Christmas Mass, or they celebrate in iftars during the month of Ramadan. Joint advocacy, which is the last model specified by Khouri, is where people from different religious communities work on joint development projects together, especially ones related to the SDGs. Samak also identifies other models of dialogue of life, which is quite similar to one of Khouri, of action, which focuses more on the practical or communal side of dialogue, of discussion, which is more related to religious or non-religious discussions, so theological or non-theological, and of experience, which is something we will focus on when I go into more details in the slides after this one. Haugerode also adds a fifth component, which is visiting each other's places. And this is something particular to Lebanon, because during the civil war, there was a green line that demarcated East Beirut from West Beirut. West Beirut was a majority of Muslims, East Beirut was a majority of Christians. And until now, you feel that there is this fear from visiting each other's places in Lebanon. So although the green line does not exist anymore physically, but it still exists in some of the minds of the Lebanese people. Haddad and Fishback also include the theological or spiritual dialogue, which is the dialogue between religious people on the level of theological similarities or differences. I'll drink. So basically, there are many challenges to interreligious dialogue. And mind you, I am speaking contextually in Lebanon, but this also works in many other countries, whether in the MENA region, in Europe, in the United States, wherever. So the common challenges I want to focus on today are: one, how can interreligious dialogues, encounters, be transformed into something more permanent? So it's amazing. People are joined together, they're discussing, they're in dialogue, religious people are on TV, they're having joint statements, but how can this be transformed into something more? How can we tell people that religion can be a driver of peace? How can we tell people that international organizations and governments have to work with faith-based organizations for conflict resolution and peace building? So this is one challenge. Two is how to balance relationship building and difficult religious and political conversations, because I see it a lot in Lebanon, that I see a lot of friends who have a really strong bond, but once they start speaking about religion or politics, everything vanishes. So how can we balance these two? How can we balance individual journeys and group affiliation? So as I said at the beginning, even though I am Christian and I have a group affiliation, I also have my own individual identity and my own understanding of what Christianity is. So how can I balance this individual identity with my collective belonging? So this is a common challenge to not only Lebanon, but also the world. If I want to focus more on the particular challenges to Lebanon, one, I speak of identity politics. We have something called identity politics in Lebanon, and how can we manage the differences and build active citizens? So a lot of people in Lebanon identify with their, for example, sectarian identity or political identity over their national identity. How can we move forward if this is the case? And how can we manage the impact of religion on state-society relations? Because you saw through the presentation and through the questions that there is such a direct relationship between politics and religion in Lebanon, and that a lot of religious authorities affect political decisions and vice versa. So those are challenges that we maybe are not able to fix 100%, but we are moving forward toward that. So how can we challenge? In case you haven't noticed, I also mentioned the 2 meters distance in my virtual presentation. So we have a two-pronged approach. One, we have to try as much as possible to create everyday spaces for social interaction. And when I speak about spaces, I don't only mean physical spaces where people can meet, although this is something missing in Lebanon, but you also have to have virtual ones, to tell people that there are those safe spaces where you can meet, where you can know the other, and where you can break the fear from the different other. And we have to build individual confidence to increase empathy by telling people that your individual identity matters. No one is here to make you let go of this identity, but at the same time, you are living in a diverse world that is becoming more and more diverse on a daily basis. So how can you be empathetic with someone who is different than you are? We also have to take into consideration that IRD has to focus on a top-down and bottom-up approach. So both elites and communities have to be involved in the process. So a combination or a salad, as I like to define it, is for IRD is a multi-level approach, creating the spaces of encounter, eliminating the culture of fear that is so rampant in Lebanon and the world, and promoting individual religious identities. We should also take into consideration that there are 3 levels of dialogue: the high level between religious leaders, the mid levels between community leaders, and the grassroots level between people like you and I. So briefly, if I want to talk about the top-down approach, the top-down approach could take a lot of formats. One, it could be dialogue between high-level religious leaders. Why is this important? Because a lot of religious leaders are respected by people, especially in the MENA region. I don't know if you are aware, but in February 2019, the Pope Francis and Sheikh Al-Azhar Sheikh Ahmad Tayyib, they signed a human fraternity document together, a joint statement calling for reconciliation. I think my colleagues will also share the Nostra Aetate, the Human Fraternity Document, and the Fratelli Tutti. All of those are joint statements or statements from religious organizations that speak about diversity, respect of differences, and living together, specifically the respect of human nature. So looking at the human as a human first before looking at him or her as Christian, Muslim, Buddhist, etc. However, there is an issue with those statements. How can these be turned into reality? How can I have those statements on one side and then have countries, for example, discriminating on the basis of religion or ethnicity? So how can we do this? This could be worked on in the bottom-up approach or other top-down approaches. So for the top-down, we also speak about policy making. For instance, at Adyan Foundation, we have a project called Youth Mock Parliament, where young people are being trained to vote on a non-sectarian basis. So as you see, our political system is all based on sects. So how can we vote on a non-sectarian basis? How can young people be transformed into active active citizens first, and not as tools for sectarian or political parties? We need something called targeted research. I think academia has to let go of this rigid format that it has been taking for the past centuries and have a more targeted, more practical research with realistic recommendations, similar to an IRD mapping that we did at Adyan in Lebanon, Jordan, Iraq, and Turkey about the interreligious organizations and activities in those 4 countries and what can we do better. In education, if I'm talking about the top-down approach, I'm talking in terms of curricula development. How can we teach our young people to be better citizens through improving the curricula of civics, philosophy, and history? And this is particularly important in Lebanon. If I'm talking about the bottom-up approach, I'm talking about schools, education on diversity and inclusivity. What does it mean we're educating people on living together? One, we're increasing their positive outlook towards diversity. We're telling kids that you or your peers, you're different, you're not the same. So how can you appreciate this diversity? And we're strengthening their initiatives. So we're strengthening their ability to be active citizenships in their own communities or societies. We're talking more about inclusive citizenship. I mean, I'm being brief as much as possible, but those are huge concepts that I would really advise you to read more on. So inclusive citizenship requires us to recognize not only an individual's social and political right, but also cultural rights. So inclusive citizenship does not shy away from speaking about religion in public. On the contrary, it provides a certain framework to manage this specific religious or ethnic or cultural diversity. When I'm talking about the bottom-up approach, I'm talking about community engagement. How can religious leaders and activists be socially responsible towards their own community? And when I'm talking about the concept of religious social responsibility, which is quite similar to corporate social responsibility, I'm talking about consolidating discourse, like the ones we saw maybe in the joint statements, with action. So I'm asking religious leaders not only to say or to promote respect in their homilies or sermons. I'm asking them to be examples, to show the lay people that this is how you're supposed to deal with people who are different. This is how you're supposed to manage diversity. We have to invest in the youth. We have to include people of faith and non-faith. I know that when we're talking about interreligious dialogue, maybe sometimes agnostics or atheists might think that they do not have a role, but they do have a role, because at the end of it all, when I'm talking about interreligious dialogue, I'm also talking about intercultural dialogue. And we all have different aspects of our cultures that are different. I'm talking about spiritual solidarity. So it's both a faith-based position and an experience lived with others. I guess what I'm trying to say is it's really important to have a role model speaking about religious diversity, but we can only move forward with dialogue if we experience it ourselves, if we look at the different other as a human being first. You might say I'm really idealistic. I know that there are a lot of challenges. I mentioned those challenges at the beginning. However, if we persist, if we go forward with what I'm talking about, I'm sure that year after year after year, we will get closer to our target. The last, not the last, but the last in my presentation way to target is media, through preventing violent extremism and the promotion of existential narratives. What are existential narratives? It's highlighting the stories of heroes who are working on bringing people together, rather than highlighting stories that just instigate hate speech or hatred, or does not respect the freedom of expression as well. I wanted to show a movie here, but I'll keep it till the end. And if we have time, we can see it together. So here we're talking more about the role of youth and women in interreligious dialogue. And this is something that we most of the time forget. And you can see that my first point is no to the essentialist view of women as more peaceful. Please, I'm begging everyone to stop saying that women should be part of interreligious dialogue because they are by nature more peaceful. This is something, maybe there are a lot of studies that show this, but this is not why women should be part of interreligious dialogue. One, we should understand that there is a very complex relationship between gender and religion. And most of the time, people think that religion does not respect women. However, I need to highlight that it's the misinterpretation of certain religious texts or certain religions that do not respect women. And this is why we need two things. We need a gendered understanding of religion, and this is something that a lot of amazing women academics are doing, like Dr. Naila Tabbara, Professor Azza Karam. They're providing a gendered understanding of religion, thus leading to a gendered understanding of conflict as well, which would help us have better strategies in conflict resolution and peace building. Why is it important to include women and particularly youth? One, we are guaranteeing a more inclusive representation. Youth have more malleable, salient identities like we talked about before. If we target youth at the level of education, then we are creating more active and inclusive citizens, and youth might provide us, please give us the chance to provide you with innovative approaches to interfaith dialogue, like what we spoke about before. People who know me in this chat know that I'm obsessed with acronyms. So whenever I have a presentation, I try as much as possible to get acronyms in there to summarize my whole presentation. So IRD, interreligious dialogue, we have to focus on three main components for a successful interreligious dialogue. I, for inclusivity, so we have to take gender, age, and I'm really glad that there is a presentation on this generation gap, because it's something that might hinder dialogue. Geographical location, ethnicity, religious or faith backgrounds. So no one should be excluded from the process of dialogue. Relativism, taking context into consideration. So we have people who are called conflict managers who take a certain, for example, a context, and they work at peace building accordingly. And there are democratizers who think that one size fits all, and this is not something that we want. We cannot say that what works in Lebanon will work in Bosnia, or what works in Bosnia will work in Germany, or what works in Germany will work in Egypt. So we have to take in the context into the consideration. We can share best practices, however, we cannot impose a certain process on communities or on countries. The last point is diversity and finding the right way to manage this diversity, whether it's through inclusive citizenship, through its religious social responsibility. What works best? What works best to find a framework to manage these individual and collective identities? And at the end, I would like to end with this quote because I really like it and I really think it captures the essence of dialogue. And I would really recommend you to read this book, The Miracle of Dialogue, which is dialogue is to love what blood is to the body. So this is how related dialogue and love are. When the flow of blood stops, the body dies. When dialogue stops, love dies and resentment and hate are born. But dialogue can restore a dead relationship. Indeed, this is the miracle of dialogue. It can bring back a relationship that has died. There is only one qualification to the claims of dialogue. It must be one, mutual, and proceed from both sides, and the parties to it must persist relentlessly. So I know, again, this is quite idealistic, but we cannot move forward with dialogue if we do not, one, persist, if we do not let go of hatred, and if we do not let love conquer. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ana Maria. You are
I'm
more
fine.
than fine. I think you gave us all food for thought for many other time slots that we could allocate for the ID talk. Also, I think we still have a few minutes more if you would like to share the short movie that you wanted to share with our audience, please.
So this short movie that I'm going to share is from a series by Ta'adudiya. Ta'adudiya is an Arabic language platform by Adyan Foundation, where we share content related to pluralism. So we have two web talks or web shows. One is Talk, or What is Your Story, and two is Fina Nahki Din, or We Can Talk About Religion. Basically tries to highlight the stories of heroes from Lebanon and the MENA region who are working towards the promotion of diversity. And the video I will show now is translated in English. It's about a priest in northern Lebanon whose school is at a green line between Jabal Mahsen and Bibit Tibane, and the population and there are a lot of conflicts there between Alawite, population from Alawite background, so Alawite is a confession, and the Sunni background. So he's saying how during this conflict, the school was a haven for a lot of the students and the families there. So I will share my screen now for this video. I forgot where it is. Oh, okay. It's the same. Yes, you can see my screen, right?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. So just the sound will be heard now.
ضلينا تحت معارك تقريبا 14 جولة شهور بلا كهرباء، مقطش الكهرباء، ما حدا بيسترجي يفوت لهون. وفي ناس يقولوا لي انه شو بدك؟ انه اترك انت بتجيك رصاص او بيجيك شيء. موقع الكنيسة هون والمدرسة هو موقع مميز، هي بالنص تماما بين منطقتين بحرب، كانوا تبين وجبل محسن هن من طائفتين مختلفتين، سني وعلوية. كان عندي إيمان واسع إنه ما ممكن نسكر هالمدرسة لأنه عندها دور وعندها رسالة.
أنا ابني الكبير كان يجي بالبداية بده يحكي بس مع أحمد، ما بده يحكي مع علي مثلا، يعني كان أبونا يوقف له إنه لا ما بيصير هيك، هيدا رفيقك وهيدا رفيقك.
طريق الصح الصعب، مشان هيك لازم نكون كتلة واحدة ونتساعد أكيد بكل شيء.
فمشان هيك كان البير جورج عنده دور كتير فعال، إنه لا لازم هيدي الحساسيات تلتغى، ولازم إنه ترجعوا تحبوا بعضكم مثل الأول.
كان في باب يلي بيودي على التبانة ويودوا منه التلاميذ بس تعلق، وفي باب بيودي على الجبل بس يروحوا منه ما بقى يقدروا يقنصون ويسيبون. بالحقيقة فكرت إذا بدنا نضل هيك على صعيد البابان، يعني نحن عم نكرس التقسيم والفرقة، وقلت إنه لازم يكون في باب واحد عم يجمع الكل تيفوتوا على المدرسة ويطلعوا من المدرسة. وبلش هالشي يأثر نتفة إنه بلشوا يتعرفوا على بعضهم، الآخر ما بقى إنه شي بيفزع بالنسبة للتاني.
بمحيطي في ناس متعصبين، اوقات بيكون في بلوك بيني وبينهم، حاول اشرح لهم، في ناس بتتقبل، في ناس ما بتتقبل انه تشرح لها ليش، انه خلص انسان مثلي مثله، يعني وين المشكله انه نتخالط روح واجي.
هالاشياء المشتركه اللي عاشوها مع بعضهم كان عم يرجعوا ينقلوها للعائله لهون، لجوزها، للناس يلي عم تلتقي فيهم.
نعمل معارك، تكون اوقات الضرب نازل ونحن على التليفون، يعني على اتصال مع بعضنا.
اللي جيبي اهلك وتعال.
انه عنا هم انه يكون هالمكان هو محل يلي عم يلتقوا فيه كلهم، يعيشوا الفرح، يعيشوا اللقاء، يعيشوا الحوار، ويعيشوا اكتشاف الاخر.
انا بدي اولادي يتعلموا، واللي فت فيه انا ما بدي اولادي يفوت فيه، انه بدي اروح اوصف فلان او فلان. اللي عملوا ابونا ما حدا عمله عنا بطول بلصان. قبل ما يصير شيء كنا قبل ربع ساعه ونص ساعه نبلغوا انه ساعه الفلان ساعه كذا معلمين يطلعوا من المدرسه، يطلعوا من هون، ما بدنا حدا هون. وكان يعملنا هون بالسن نحن اجتماعين 3 اجتماعات تطلع من هون، ما في لا من فوق ولا من تحت، كان موفق بين الكل.
شو استفدنا من هالحرب؟ ولا شيء، تأثرنا. كل واحد منا عنده دور يغير اول شيء العقليه ونساعدهم حتى يقتنعوا انه هن اللي قادرين يغيروا، بنعيش مبسوطين وبنساعد بعضنا وبنوصل لمستقبل افضل. هيدي قصتي، انت شو قصتك؟
So I particularly like this video because it summarizes as well everything I spoke about during my presentation. So it speaks about love, it speaks about spaces of encounter, it speaks about people sharing their thoughts, their challenges. So if we're talking about Tripoli, and Tripoli has a lot of people who are poor, who do not have access to education, to healthcare. So it focuses a lot on community, and it also highlights the story of people who are trying to bring others together. So yeah, this is basically it. And I hope, I don't know, it was as you expected.
Oh, this is much more than what we expected. I think this is condensed in so many ways and so much food for thought. And just to remind our first-time participants that there will be a follow-up article coming out of this topic, and you could enrich this article by asking your questions and giving your immediate reactions. Maria, I just wanted to ask if we have any pressing questions in our chat before going into small group discussion.
Hi, thank you, Anna, for giving me the floor, and thank you, Anna Maria, for this amazing talk. The chat has been bombarded today. It has been so active, and a lot of thank yous for this nice presentation. We do have one comment about convocation, and also like a small comment if that's what EU tends to call cohesion.
Christian Muslim convocation that I talked about is meeting. So the convocation was used in terms of meeting.
Just got another question in. Time-wise, how long do you believe it takes to change someone's mentality? From Alexandra.
We cannot have a specific timeline. However, there is a program at Adyan called Al-Wan program, and this has been running for the past 12 years. And it's with the high school students, with secondary 1 and secondary 2 students. So basically 15, 16, 17, this age group. And this year we had something called an Al-Wan impact study, which was supposed to show us how much those students have changed in the way of mentality, attitudes, and behaviors. This is still ongoing, so I do not have specific results, but I think from what I've seen as well during the past 3 years, there are a lot who continued with Adyan, with our youth network, with our volunteers network. They still have their own identities, their own understandings. However, they do share the common values of diversity, solidarity, and human dignity. However, there are people who do not share those values anymore and who went back to what their families, what their communities think or believe, or they adapted the attitudes of those people. So I cannot say that there is a specific timeline, because every person is different. And some people might be adopting these values now, but they can change in 2 years' time and then adopt them back in 5 years' time. I think this depends on where you are, your community, your education, the overall political, security, economic situation of the country you are in as well. I'm sorry, usually in social sciences, behavioral sciences, it's quite difficult to give a specific answer. So it always depends on something else. It always, because people are so different and because times are so salient. So, but this is particularly what we're trying to do. So if you start at a young age with education, then you're having more possibility for people to grow up on these certain values or beliefs, and as they grow older, understand them more or explore them more.
Thank you very much, Anna Maria. I'm sure that our participants also have something else to ask, maybe also to process this talk in smaller groups. So what we will do now is Maria will help by dividing you randomly into smaller groups, and we will give you 15 minutes time in which we would like to ask you to do the following. I'm trying now to share my screen, but the task for this 15 minutes is extremely extremely simple. So we want you to discuss as a group what were your impressions of this input, of Anna Maria's input, and come back with one question or one common insight that you have as a group. So when you come back in 15 minutes time, we will give you the floor, and we promise to hear all of your questions or all of your insights, but just please limit one per group so we can still fit into the time.
Hi, I'm Aline. So I will speak from the name of the room number 1. Our conversation was going around the fact that is the interesting fact of focusing on the differences instead of the similarities between people when communicating. So our doubts from that would be, how can we, knowing that there are differences and that our predisposition is to, let's say, see the distance when there's differences instead of seeing a possibility to communicate, how can we make an atmosphere or appropriate room or session in which people who see the difference as distance are able to talk? Because for us, these kind of situations in which people can speak, in which people can explain their ideas, and especially listen to the ideas of other people or feelings or beliefs, people who attend that have already a set of open mind and curiosity for other cultures. So it would be maybe more efficient to arrive to people who do not have this curiosity, who do not have this openness already, so to make them develop these abilities. So that would be our question: how to arrive to these people.
Thank you very much. And now please room number 2. Please try to formulate your question or comment as condensed as it is possible. Somebody from room number 2. Okay, then maybe we go to room number 3. Then we come back.
If you want, I can intervene. I'm from room number 3. From our side, it's more a reflection than a comment. And thanks, Ana Maria, for your amazing and enriching presentation. I'm coordinating an Erasmus Plus project entitled Diversity Plus, which aims at developing more inclusive and high quality early education and care provisions. And during the work group, I shared with my colleagues about the importance of sensitizing young people, but from a very early age, the ages 0 to 6, about the different facets of diversities. So including also the ones you mentioned and the ones which are the focus of this talk, namely cultural differences and namely religious aspects, because it's since that age that the first stereotypes and prejudices start arising, thus mining social cohesion, peace, etc. This is our reflection during the teamwork. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Carmen for room number 2. That's what we figured out on the go.
Okay, so shall I speak for our room, or does anyone?
You decide as a group.
Okay. I can summarize our insights. So we had 2 Lebanese in the group, and one of them worked in the projects, and he said it was really nice to see the connection between the high level and how these things were thought, and then at the grassroots level, that it made so much sense for him. And I think it was Giorgio, and hope was a word that came a few times, that things are difficult, but there is hope, and there are so many rewarding moments when they see changes at the grassroots level. Then another thing that was mentioned was age, that it's easier to implement these changes and to facilitate interreligious dialogue with youth. Then when we go, and I guess in the next talks, we will talk about intergenerational dialogue also. And then this was one question that I personally had, not necessarily that we discussed as a group, but I will just ask it. How do you reconcile? So I'm at the moment in Sweden, and I like that Ana Maria mentioned context, because I totally agree that the context is very different in different countries. And I wondered, how do you reconcile religious beliefs and human rights. So when they clash, how do you address these when you have to have some sensitive discussions with youth?
Thank you very much. A question I will be personally also very interested to have an answer to. And then group number 4.
Yeah, I can start for group number 4 if my group has other questions or comments, because we started with the question that came from my working group, like my work. I work in Brussels in a project of interreligious dialogue, and there I work for the schools. But in general, in our project, it really, I really noticed a lot that usually when we are like this with talking groups, it's mostly that we see this younger generation of young women that are working there, and then we always have like this huge gap where there is nobody in between, and then we have like more like old guys like that. So, and then it's very male dominated from that side. And because you talked about like religious dialogue and interreligious dialogue, how it's gendered all the time, and because I work in schools, there is no problem to attract females, but I feel like when we do it in the free time, it's always that we only talk with men, a little with women. So my question was like, how do we connect them? Like how do we like do practical, like concrete steps to involve more women in our interreligious dialogue in the free time? And like there already came like an answer from Jenny, who worked more not just on religious dialogue, but in other way, like with immigrants. And there the questions come, like they have a lot of female participants that have questions about religion. So they come from another side. And I feel like, how do we connect the two of them, women that have questions, like how do we get them around the table? That was my question. I don't know if the rest of the group wants to add something extra to it.
Thank you very much, Justine. And let's shortly hear group number 5, if you have something that you would like to bring to the floor.
Yeah, I can. I hope I can talk, because we really didn't decide on the spokesperson. So we didn't really had a question because we had also Mira from the Finland and Nicole from the Austria, and one other person who didn't spoke at all, didn't connect. But it was really eye-opening. And now at the moment, I never had actually experience with the different religion aspects, because mostly here as Christians, of course, we have this Orthodox and other kind of Christianity here, Catholics, and also so on and so on. But it really opened my interest to get to know local Muslim communities here in Latvia. So yeah, maybe some of my colleagues want to continue with something, but it was more eye-opening. Thank you, Anna Maria.
Thank you very much, Maya, for sharing your interest. And I think this is beyond our expectation to invoke interest in our participants to go and discover more. It's also really interesting that this series, we are going to finish with an intersectionality talk, and we are already from the first one talking about intersection of age and gender and religion. I think there is a huge potential there that is still undiscovered. So Anna Maria, now you have the biggest challenge in the world. You have about 5 minutes to address all of this, but also to remind you and our participants that you have an article that can also give some answers to these questions, maybe beyond these 5 minutes. You have the floor.
Okay, I also have the timer. So for the first group, it's always difficult to focus on differences instead of similarities, because when you focus on similarities, people are just speaking, they're happy, they're not fearful, they're open. However, whenever you start speaking about a certain difference, or Christianity says this, Islam says that, everyone becomes, so afraid, ready to fight, ready to say this, no, I'm right, no, you're right. So it's quite difficult. A really interesting handbook developed called Ambassadors for Dialogue, which might help you or give you ideas of workshops or activities that might open the conversation or difficult conversations, specifically ones focusing on differences rather than similarities. How to reach people who are not interested when they read about interreligious or interfaith dialogue? Simply change the title, make something or change the type of activity, write it in a way that would attract people who would like, to fight or to debate rather than to dialogue. So make it be as creative as possible depending on the context you are in. I know those are really brief and general, but so I can go through all the questions. Group number 2, yes, hope is a huge component of interreligious dialogue and intercultural dialogue, because if you do lose hope because of something or someone, then this might hinder the whole process. It is easier to target the youth, and this is why usually I focused a lot on education and on starting at an early age. How do you reconcile religious beliefs and human rights? I think even human rights practitioners do not have an answer to this question. And even we do not have an answer to this question. However, this was something that I was discussing with my colleague last time, and I kind of suggested something, especially because we were preparing something for religious leaders, to try to let them identify what human rights are protected within their own religious beliefs. Or if they do not want to call them human rights because it's a westernized concept and this is something really rampant in Lebanon, then what would they call them? What does their religion or their religious belief do to protect rights of people, to ensure equality, to ensure equity? So if you want, just push the conversation to them. Okay, so don't do it, I'm teaching you, just ask them what they would call such concepts or how can they protect their own religious communities as well as other religious communities. It is important to sensitize young people at the ages of 0 and 6, and there is another program at Adyan called Alwan Junior with students who are 8 or 9 years old. So they are introduced to the religions of the world in a really phonetic kind of way. So with music, clay, graphics, videos. So this is also another program in schools. Group number 4, it is a male-dominated sphere. Religion is a male-dominated sphere, especially in Lebanon. We have basically Islam, Sunni, Christian, Maronite, and it's all men. There are no women religious leaders. There are the sisters, but still they do not have such a role. Sisters are more confined to education, to schools, to Catholic schools. So this is what they do. How can we involve women in that? Give them more leadership roles, give them more responsibility, make them feel that their voices are heard, rather than focusing or highlighting stories of men in media. Highlight the stories of women, show that they can work in spheres other than just education, raising kids. So show that they do have a theological opinion that matters. Group number 5, it's really important to engage all local communities. And I was speaking while you were in breakout rooms, it's quite difficult, especially in the European world, to engage these Muslim communities because there might be some kind of fear, just like in the MENA region, there are kinds of fears from other religious groups. But however, try as much as possible to involve all local communities. I am kind of not liking the word minorities recently because it is discriminatory in nature. However, we do use it to refer to a certain group of people. However, try as much as possible to involve all communities in dialogue, even if they are representative of 1 or 2 or 3 people. So yes, 5 minutes.
And maybe a special request from the team, because we had our own breakout room in a way. Could you please elaborate maybe in a couple of sentences, but also in the article, this interesting concept of the religious social responsibility? What is that?
Okay, so religious social responsibility is basically a concept for religious leaders and religious activists. So those who teach religion in schools, or even media professionals who work in religious media out. So as I said, the concept in itself is to consolidate this discourse with action. How? Through community service initiatives that are needs-based, through changing the narrative in their homilies and sermons, through using their social media and their influence and their impact to tell people that this is what you're supposed to do, not just by saying it, as I was explaining, but also by doing. For instance, there was an example about that during last Ramadan, because it was COVID, it was the pandemic, the whole Lebanon was on lockdown. A lot of people were asking for mosques to open. However, this would have been a disaster. So what religious leaders tried to do, they told them, no, we can celebrate Ramadan at home, we can pray at home. And they started, it was really interesting because this campaign, you had religious leaders from all over Lebanon just taking those really funny videos, selfie videos, and posting them on their social media, telling people that they can celebrate, that it's not, it would not, belittle their faith in any way. So this is just an example. And it, on another perspective, it also encourages or asks international organizations and governments to consider faith-based organizations and faith-based leaders as change makers as well. I don't know if you're familiar with Religions for Peace, this global movement, but this is also what they try to do through their own projects all over, especially focusing during the last year on climate change, for instance. So this is how also religion might be socially responsible towards the environment. So I gave general examples, but I can better elaborate in the article.
This is much more than examples, because this is also inspiration, and this is also some kind of food for thought, I think, for all of us after this. This is some of the final things left to do today before we start closing the ID talks, the first of the second series. On one hand, I would like to ask all the participants now to go on chat and put one word that you are taking from this ID talk, your impression in one word. Please put it there. We would like to create a word cloud afterwards to see how our participants felt about today. In the meantime, is coming my favorite moment of the ID talks, the big reveal moment. And I would like to pass the floor now to Olaja, our graphic recorder that you might have forgotten about, but we haven't. So Olaja, we are waiting for the magic to happen now.
Thank you so much. I hope you can hear me well. I will share my screen. And I mean, of course, it was absolutely impossible to represent so much knowledge that Ana Maria shared with us today. It's incredible. I was thrown off with so many quotes, so many ways how she phrase the theoretical context. So this is our contributions during now this plenary session. And here you can see a little bit the main steps that Ana Maria was guiding us through. So starting with what is interreligious dialogue, going to, okay, development, we're having stages, how it is in Lebanon, what are the main challenges, common challenges, and also challenges of interreligious dialogue in Lebanon, areas specific. Then this multi-level approach with the types of top-down and bottom-up approaches. And just to wrap it up, you can, just take a look, but I would really highlight the quote that Ana Maria said when she was paraphrasing the B quote that she showed us at the end. She finalized with, okay, we cannot achieve dialogue if we don't let love conquer. And for me, that was beautiful, and I take it as a wrap up of this talk, because it's something that we should remember together with this hope. Also this importance of love and how it can change everything around us. So thank you so much for that.
It's amazing.
Thank you very much, Olaja. These amazing graphics, when they are even more polished afterwards, you will be able to see in different publications, online and offline publications of Salto Inclusion and Diversity. So please don't forget to follow our social media channels. Yes, we are ready to close. Anna Maria, if you have some final remarks, we'll be happy to hear from you.
I'm just thankful for the Salto team for giving me the chance to share my passion. As Maria was saying, I am quite passionate regarding that. Thank you so much also for listening to me and for sharing your own experiences and your questions. And I think we are all here present, we all contribute to dialogue in one way or another and in our countries. So thank you for all the hard work you are doing. And I think if we all continue this hard work, we will be able to reach a really satisfactory.
So thank you very much, Anna Maria. Thank you very much for everybody who were with us today. And in 2 weeks' time, we will have the second one and so on. So please stay tuned, come back. We really like when our participants keep coming back to our ID Talk series. And for today, this is it. Thank you very much and have a nice rest of your day. Bye-bye.